In a nation divided by heated debates over power and borders, whispers of federal overreach echo through the halls of Congress. What if one leader's words could reshape the very foundation of democracy? Tonight, we delve into the storm brewing in Washington. Welcome to Worldview, your trusted source for in depth global and domestic analysis. I'm your host, bringing you the facts with clarity and context as we examine the day's most pressing developments from the corridors of power to the front lines of international tension. Before we start, wherever you're watching or listening from, drop a comment, hit like, and subscribe to the channel. Today, we'll continue this conversation in the comments and respond to your questions. The political landscape in Washington is fraught with tension as the White House navigates criticism from within its own party and across the aisle regarding recent statements by President Trump. These remarks have centered on the idea of federal intervention in state-run elections, particularly in areas led by Democratic officials, and the potential for Congress to impose national standards on voting processes. This comes at a time when trust in electoral systems remains a flashpoint for many Americans, still reeling from past disputes over voting integrity. To understand the full scope, let's step back and consider the broader implications. Elections in the United States have long been a state-level affair, rooted in the principles of federalism that allow local governments to tailor processes to their populations. However, President Trump's suggestions introduce a layer of complexity, raising questions about constitutional boundaries and the balance of power between federal and state authorities. Analysts point out that such proposals could spark legal battles, potentially reaching the Supreme Court, where interpretations of Article 1 of the Constitution would be scrutinized. This article explicitly assigns the responsibility for determining the times, places, and manner of elections to state legislatures, with Congress holding a supervisory role only in specific circumstances. Adding to the urgency, these comments arrive amid a resolved but tenuous funding agreement that averted a prolonged government shutdown. Congress has greenlit a measure backed by the president, which temporarily stabilizes operations but sets up a high-stakes negotiation period over resources for immigration enforcement agencies. The House of Representatives approved the bill in a close vote, with a notable crossover of support from 21 Democratic members aligning with the Republican majority. This bipartisan element, though limited, highlights the pragmatic pressures facing lawmakers as they balance fiscal responsibility with policy priorities. The president has expressed strong intent to enact this legislation without delay, emphasizing its role in maintaining government functionality. Yet the deal merely postpones deeper conflicts, allocating just a fortnight for discussions on funding the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency and the broader Department of Homeland Security. These talks are shadowed by ongoing controversies surrounding the administration's aggressive approach to immigration in regions like Minnesota, where operations have drawn widespread scrutiny. Delving deeper into the immigration narrative, the White House has outlined its stance on upcoming negotiations, underscoring a commitment to dialogue while remaining firm on core objectives. Officials have reiterated that concessions on enforcing immigration laws are off the table, framing these efforts as fulfilling a mandate from a significant portion of the electorate. This position reflects a broader strategy to prioritize the removal of individuals with criminal records who are in the country without legal status, a policy that has resonated with certain voter bases but alienated others. This rhetoric follows announcements from the Department of Homeland Security leadership, including Secretary Kristi Noem's directive to equip all federal personnel in Minneapolis with body-worn cameras. This move comes in response to tragic incidents involving the deaths of two American citizens, Renee Good and Alex Preddy, at the hands of federal agents. Such events have amplified calls for transparency and accountability in law enforcement operations, particularly those conducted in urban environments with diverse communities. To humanize the impact, consider the testimony delivered by relatives of the victims during a forum organized by Democratic leaders. One brother of Renee Good shared poignant anecdotes about the lasting effects on families and neighborhoods, describing how these encounters have altered daily life and instilled fear in young children. His words paint a picture of communities forever changed, where the presence of federal agents evokes uncertainty and grief. This personal angle underscores the human cost of policy enforcement, prompting broader discussions on reforming tactics to prioritize community relations and de-escalation. Now, turning to insights from key correspondents, we have perspectives from those embedded in the heart of these developments. From the White House grounds, our Chief Justice and National Affairs expert provides a window into the administration's mindset. When queried on the president's level of engagement in the forthcoming Department of Homeland Security funding deliberations, the response reveals a nuanced involvement. The president has signaled a desire to prevent disruptions in government services, yet he has also maintained some distance from granular policy decisions, such as the implementation of body cameras or specific operational strategies. This selective engagement is evident in the appointment of figures like Tom Homan to oversee activities in Minnesota, with direct reporting lines to the Oval Office. Such structures suggest a hands-on approach to high-profile issues, even as the president navigates the political thorns of interior enforcement. These operations have faced backlash due to fatalities and detentions that affect long-term residents, balancing against the administration's goals of border security and reducing unauthorized immigration, priorities that enjoy strong support among certain constituencies but face resistance in affected states. Exploring the catalyst for the body camera policy, it's clear that public demand for visibility into agent-public interactions played a pivotal role. Advocates argue that footage serves dual purposes: enhancing public trust by offering an objective record of events and bolstering officer safety amid rising threats. The Department of Homeland Security has reported a surge in dangers faced by personnel, making these devices a tool for protection as much as accountability. Interestingly, the president has publicly attributed this decision squarely to Secretary Noem, creating a buffer between himself and the policy's rollout. This distancing tactic allows for flexibility in responding to criticism, while funding and availability of equipment have been cited as reasons for prior delays. However, the policy stops short of addressing other contentious elements, such as agent anonymity through masks or the specifics of engagement rules, leaving room for ongoing debate. Shifting focus to Capitol Hill, our correspondent there outlines the path forward for the immigration and security funding battle. The recently passed bill, while a relief, is viewed as the simpler hurdle compared to the impending negotiations. Democratic leaders are formalizing their reform proposals, aiming to dispatch them to Republican counterparts and the administration imminently. This delay in substantive talks heightens the pressure, with finger-pointing over leadership roles adding to the complexity. Senate Republicans, in particular, are stepping back, recognizing the challenge of conceding ground that could limit the executive branch's latitude in enforcement, especially under a GOP-led White House. House Speaker Mike Johnson's comments emphasize a call for good faith participation from state and local officials in Democratic strongholds, urging cooperation to foster safer conditions for implementing federal laws. Yet, even moderate voices within the Democratic Party insist on legislative codification of changes, refusing to accept administrative adjustments alone. This stance could derail any agreement lacking enforceable reforms, illustrating the deep ideological divides at play. Reflecting on how the funding measure cleared the House, credit goes in part to the president's direct intervention via social media, rallying reluctant Republicans by insisting on passage without amendments like the proposed SAVE Act. This legislation, which seeks to mandate proof of citizenship for voting, was deemed a non-starter by Democrats, who argue it redundantly addresses existing requirements and could suppress turnout. The Speaker's narrow majority necessitated intense behind-the-scenes negotiations, including direct engagements on the floor, to secure the votes. Looking ahead, incorporating elements like defunding sanctuary jurisdictions or attaching the SAVE Act poses significant obstacles as Republicans grapple with internal unity and cross-aisle compromises. President Trump's recent podcast appearance has reignited discussions on electoral overhaul, where he floated the notion of federal oversight in select states to combat perceived irregularities. Framing unauthorized immigrants as influencing votes illegally, he called for Republican-led initiatives to centralize control, targeting what he described as mismanaged systems in certain areas. Constitutionally, this clashes with established precedents as Article 1 vests primary authority in states. Republican leaders on the Hill have responded cautiously, affirming their preference against full federalization and emphasizing state responsibilities provided integrity is maintained. Concerns about practices in progressive states persist, but the pushback highlights a reluctance to upend traditional structures. Democrats, conversely, have condemned these ideas as authoritarian overreach, urging their GOP colleagues to voice opposition more robustly. Figures like Senate Intelligence Committee members express alarm over potential erosions of safeguards, linking them to broader worries about election fairness in upcoming cycles. The White House press secretary attempted to reframe the president's words as endorsements of the SAVE Act, portraying it as a straightforward measure to ensure voting eligibility. This clarification aims to align the comments with legislative efforts rather than sweeping changes, though the president's history of questioning election outcomes adds layers of skepticism. Historically, Trump's focus on unsubstantiated claims of fraud dates back to previous elections, including suggestions of postponing midterms, later dismissed as jest. Such patterns fuel ongoing partisan friction, with implications for public confidence in democratic institutions. Addressing whether the president could unilaterally pursue nationalization, experts note that constitutional hurdles and potential state lawsuits would likely thwart such moves. The mention of 15 specific states in his remarks doesn't align neatly with nationwide laws like the SAVE Act, suggesting a more targeted intent that could invite further scrutiny. As for congressional reactions, Republicans appear eager to pivot away from this topic, prioritizing states' rights, a core conservative value, and avoiding entanglements that revive past election controversies. Leaders like Speaker Johnson, with his legal background, underscore constitutional fidelity, while pivoting to promote the SAVE Act as a solution to perceived vulnerabilities. The president's fixation on 2020 outcomes continues to influence his rhetoric, intertwined with themes of retribution against perceived injustices. The recent FBI action in Fulton County, Georgia, securing records and ballots under warrant, exemplifies this, raising questions about the probe's scope and timing relative to future elections. Democratic critiques, voiced by figures like Senator Mark Warner, highlight concerns over the involvement of intelligence officials in domestic matters, particularly those tied to personal grievances. Calls for accountability, including potential testimonies, underscore bipartisan unease, though Republican responses remain muted. In a separate interview, Congressman Ted Lieu, a prominent Democratic voice, dismissed the nationalization idea as constitutionally invalid, vowing fierce opposition to any legislative attempts. He stressed the need to balance economic messaging, pointing to rising inflation indicators, with defenses of voting rights. On the funding front, Lieu defended Democratic crossovers as strategic, framing the short-term shutdown of DHS funding as leverage for reforms like banning masks for agents, mandating body cameras, requiring judicial warrants, and ensuring cooperation in investigations. He countered Republican skepticism on timelines by noting their control of the Senate and the president's influence. Shifting to international affairs, tensions with Iran escalated with the downing of a drone approaching a U.S. carrier amid preparations for nuclear talks. Regional allies advocate de-escalation, fearing a broader conflict that could disrupt vital waterways like the Strait of Hormuz. From Tehran, reports indicate Iranian officials' warnings of severe repercussions juxtaposed with U.S. assertions of defensive actions. These incidents, while contained, heighten stakes for diplomacy. Domestically, the search for Nancy Guthrie, mother of a prominent journalist, intensifies with FBI involvement. Timeline details and investigative tools like cellular analysis offer hope, though delays in accessing surveillance footage complicate efforts. Authorities urge public tips, emphasizing the urgency in abduction cases. In breaking developments, President Trump's bill signing event included unfiltered responses on elections, immigration, Ukraine, and more, reaffirming his views on federal involvement and criticizing state practices. His exchanges with reporters revealed ongoing policy pushes, like ending sanctuary cities, and personal reflections on unrelated scandals. As we conclude this examination, the intersections of domestic policy, electoral integrity, and global security remind us of the delicate threads binding our republic. These stories, from Washington's negotiations to Tehran's standoffs, shape the narrative of a nation at a crossroads, demanding vigilant oversight and informed discourse.